Hi everyone, it's the end of 2024 and so I thought I'd do a quick run through of the cars that I got in my collection and what they've cost me this year to run. Also what mileages I've done in each of them. So I've not usually done this before actually and added up what the cars have cost me each year. So I had a little bit of a shock. What I'll do is I'll run through from the cheapest car to the most expensive car at the end and tell you what I've spent and on what and what mileages I've done in each of the cars. I did recently do a video about all of the cars that I've bought, sold and kept in my small collection this year with a little bit more detail about each of the cars and what I tend to do with them. So please do check out that video if you're interested in seeing a bit more about the cars I own. I'll link it at the end of the video. I've also done videos on pretty much all of the cars that I'll talk about today in today's video. So we'll start with the cheapest cars. The Audi A6, I've only had it a month. Few hundred miles and that's cost me just £35 in road tax. My Mercedes S500 W221 era, I sold that in I think January of this year, just did a few hundred miles and consequently I just paid the road tax on that, which equated to £53. My LDV Maxus X minibus, now a very crude day van, it spends quite a lot of the year sawn and I just tax it when I need it, so that's cost me £55 in tax. I did actually fit a new plywood bulkhead that I made myself. I already had the ply, I did the work myself, so I'm not counting any costs there. And again, not very well used this year, just a few hundred miles. My Jaguar XJ Super V8, I bought that in, I think, September, so I've owned that about 4 months now. I've done around about 1,000 miles. The tax has cost me £94 and I've also bought a CD cartridge for the 6 CD changer in the boot, which was broken, so I fixed that, and so the grand total is £114 spent on that Jag. I sold my Skoda Octavia VRS at the end of the summer this year. I didn't spend anything on that except for the tax. I did just a few hundred miles, which is kind of why I sold it, I just wasn't using it. And so that cost me £274 in tax. My motorhome, which I owned for about 7 months or so of this year, again, just a few hundred miles. I didn't get away in it or use it like I intended, so it got sold. The tax on that, because it was sawn a lot of the time, cost me £85, and I did replace the door mirror before I sold it, which cost me £290. So a grand total there of £375 on the motorhome. So we're starting to get incrementally more expensive as we run through these cars here. Next, my Land Rover Series 3 1984 ex-military 109-inch wheelbase. It was running really badly, that car. I did a total ignition system overhaul, so there's quite a few parts there, spark plugs, etc. are cheap, but I bought a new coil, a distributor cap, rotor arm, electronic ignition parts, various other things. I did the work myself, and the parts with some odds and sods in there cost me £177. I also bought new seats, £100, not fitted yet, and a new door, second-hand, £30, also not fitted yet. And I've also got some paint to do a respray on that in the summer of 2025, not used yet, but that cost me £101. So a grand total of £408 on the Series 3. And I did just a few hundred miles in that, just on local tracks and roads. Next, my Mercedes S600, that was W220 era with the V12 bi-turbo engine. I'd spent a lot of money on that in 2023 actually, and I ended up selling it in, I guess, the first half of 2024. So actually the costs weren't too high compared with what I've spent on the car, as I'd already incurred a lot of the costs. I had a small service and diagnosis of some noises and faults, cost me £153. I had some idler pulleys changed on the engine, which cost me £194. And the tax on that, because it was sawn and I only owned it for part of the year, was £74. Giving a grand total of £421 on the S600, and I covered just a few hundred miles as I sold it early in the year. Then my GBS Zero, which you can see here next to me. There's always a few odd jobs on these to do. I changed the air filter that you can see over there. The old one was very tatty and worn, so that cost me £66. It's actually got a mesh metal frame, so it's much more substantial. That one's much better. Then I've bought some trim parts, so they go along the bottom edge of the bodywork and over the arches at the top there. So just to refresh that, these were perhaps not the best quality to begin with. I guess they've been on there for kind of 13 years or so, so just these are much better quality. They're a little bit fiddly to fit. I've not done it yet. It's a winter job, so I was treating myself to some new trim. That cost £240, MOT £45, and the tax on that, I keep it sawn for some months, obviously £201. So I've only covered about 1,200 miles in the GBS this year. Hopefully I'll get a few more under my belt next year, that's the intention. And that cost me a grand total of £552 for 2024. So next, my 1959 Land Rover Series 2 88-inch wheelbase model. I spent actually more than I realised on this car, mostly on parts, I suppose. I bought some new seats, seat frame, etc. £150, not yet fitted. I bought and have fitted some galvanised door tops, as the old ones were really rusting away. That was £252. Several different fluids, so some brake and clutch fluid as I was replacing some of the systems there. And I've got oil for a full gearbox, transfer box oil change as well. Those fluids came to £104. And then I had to have the manifold. There was a big crack in the exhaust manifold where it joins the engine. And there was a big crack in that. I had to get that welded. I don't weld myself, and that cost me £96. Also got paint for a full respray like the Series 3. It's going to be a busy summer 2025, and that paint cost me £136. So I've done a few hundred miles in the Series 2 this year, mostly local lanes, local country roads, etc. And it's cost me a grand total of £799 in 2024. So then another Land Rover, my Land Rover Defender Wolf, so ex-military 110-inch soft top Defender Wolf with the 300 TDI engine. A lot of parts I spent on here and some servicing. So I realised that my snorkel wasn't actually connected. So I bought some air intake pipes and fitted that up myself. The pipes cost me £55 second hand. I bought a Pioneer kit, so the kind of toolkits that came on the Defender Wolves. And because my Wolf had a replacement bonnet, it didn't actually have the fixings to fit the Pioneer kit, so the shovel and the pickaxe too. So I bought that fixing kit as well, and the Pioneer kit. That cost me £129. I fitted it myself. Then there was various kind of sundry parts, let's call them, bolts. I replaced lots of bolts as I went through and did some jobs with stainless steel. I kind of stripped back the roll cage and repainted that, so the paint and things like that. Other sundries came to a total, some new bulbs to £110. And then a couple of service items, so I got the rear brake discs replaced and the bushes on the rear suspension. A couple of other minor jobs came to £360 all in. And then my MOT and some minor failures. I think there was a bit of a leak from the fuel tank, which was nothing major. I can't actually remember what else it failed on, maybe a headlight adjustment actually, and that cost £167. So I've only done about 1,000 miles in the Wolf, again disappointingly low, hopefully more next year, and that cost a total of £821. Then my E63 AMG, notoriously actually quite an expensive car to maintain. It was a really problem-free car for me. There are some expensive parts on it, but it didn't actually cost me that much. That ownership experience was very good, I have to say. So I think I sold that at the end of May this year. Road tax up until that point was £251. I had to get the sunroof repaired, which was just a minor repair. That cost me £114. And then I had a sticky caliper, so I had that rebuilt, and also at the same time fitted the new front discs and pads that I had. So I'd bought those in 2023, so I'm not including those costs. I think that probably cost around £1,600 or so, so that's one of the bigger ticket items for that car. But the fitting and the caliper work cost £443 for a total of £808 in 2024, and I covered about 3,000 miles in that time in it. So next, my Audi A6 bi-turbo diesels. That's a C7 era car, 2013. It's my daily car, I use it to commute. I was actually quite shocked to find I'd done 17,000 miles. Given the other cars I also use, even for local trips and stuff, I was amazed actually I'd done that many miles, but there you go. It's been remarkably reliable, I shouldn't curse it, but it hasn't really cost me much to run. It's been very reliable. So I spent 30 quid on the oil for it, replacement engine oil. It MOT cost me £43. Tax cost me £305 for the year. And then a couple of things I did need doing. It needed some new front tyres. And when I got those tyres replaced, they were incredibly worn on the inside. The tracking and camber was out, so I got that done at the same time. So those tyres and adjustment of the tracking cost me £367. So I've actually bought some suspension components to replace my suspension, which is a little bit soft and 170,000 miles, probably a bit worn as well. A minor clunk, very minor clunk from the near side front suspension. So I thought a good opportunity to change it. I'm going for IBAX springs and kind of standard, effectively Sachs dampers. The IBAX won't make it low, it'll just be like a standard sports S-line height, slightly stiffer, less body roll, which is what I'm looking for. Not yet fitted, so I've just got the parts. They cost me £478. So, you know, considering I've done 17,000 miles, the grand total of £1,223, I guess isn't that bad. Then perhaps unsurprisingly, the most expensive car is the Noble behind me. So I bought this in May of this year, Noble M12 GTO 3R. Amazing car, it's brilliant. You know, obviously you can spend quite a lot on these types of cars, but they're generally not too expensive to maintain. I had a brake judder issue, so I had that looked at, some caliper work, and ended up having to have the discs skimmed. That cost me a grand total of £312. It sorted the problem for a moment, but who knows, it may come back if they're warped. I had a service, MOT, so a kind of oil change, a couple of fixes, some electrical issues, some bulbs, reseating of my door, maybe some other minor things in there, as well as the service and MOT. That cost me £769. I bought various fluids, oils, coolants, etc. for the car, a total of £125. The car has an aftermarket exhaust. And someone had, I think, made themselves a heat shield so it doesn't burn the diffuser as the exhaust is really close there. That came off without me realising, so I had to fashion my own one out of some metal, some heat shield and paint. So all those kind of things cost me £94. I just made and fitted it myself. The tax for it has cost me £144. Then the really unfortunate one, I had a minor incident with a Morrison's van in a petrol station, which I was absolutely gutted about. You know, I've managed to get through my driving life without really much incident. So this was really annoying. The tip of the wing was hit by a Morrison's van, and it pressed down onto the fiberglass where the wing support sits, and caused some damage. It was relatively minor damage, but as I'm sure you're aware, these kind of fiberglass repairs are quite expensive. Fortunately, local to me, I know a couple of guys who do Cobra replica cars and old Lotuses, etc. They're fiberglass specialists. I took it to them. They've done an absolutely brilliant job. You would not know there was any damage there. The paint job's superb. Really happy with it, but it cost me £800. So a grand total for the Noble of £2,224, and I've covered just under 3,000 miles or so in that. So that makes a grand total of £8,000, or just shy of. And you may notice I've not actually talked about insurance, so I'll just quickly run through the insurance. Normally I have one policy for pretty much all of my cars. It includes modified cars, etc., and actually also some track days as well in on that. So that policy was £1,300. Slightly annoyed this year that they didn't cover, or they changed the cover, and I could no longer insure my LDV Maxus on it, and also not my Defender Wolf. The reason for that being that it had 10 seats and is classed as a people carrier or something, so they wouldn't insure it any longer. So that was quite frustrating. I had to take out separate policies for those. About 200 quid for the van and about 250 quid roughly for the Wolf. I also had to have separate cover for the motorhome. That cost me about £250 for the time that I owned it. And then further frustration with my insurance company, having said that all cars were fine, all modifications are fine on the policy, they wouldn't insure my Noble. So I was pretty annoyed about that. And that's cost me just over £1,000 extra in another policy. So I'm obviously hoping to consolidate this coming year when all the renewals are due at the first part of this year, and reduce my insurance costs somewhat, because 2024 they were just shy of £3,000 actually, which is a lot more than I have previously paid. and a lot more than I really want to pay. So hopefully some consolidation there. So that brings the grand total to just shy of £11,000. It's also a grand total of 27,000 miles, which shocked me, across all of those different vehicles. Anyway, so there you go. I hope it gives you an interesting point of reference for what these types of cars own. It's going to fluctuate quite substantially year to year as different jobs are needed on different cars. Who knows what's around the corner, I suppose. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks very much for watching.